and thank you for having me. I live up in the Northwest. I've been up there for 11 years now, and I have, as Peter knows, I've advocated for the longest time that the St. Augustine Record is our local paper, because so many of us work or live, came from Jacksonville. A lot of the people work in Jacksonville and kind of still are in that Jacksonville mode. So, anyway, that being said.
Thank you.
I was a military brat. My dad was in the Navy. I'm actually 4 generations of relatives that have lived in St. John's, Clay, and Duval. My dad went to Lee High School in Jacksonville. My grandmother always said, once you drink of the St. John's River, you'll always be back, and I wish you were around now because that was true. I went to Florida State University. I graduated with a degree in public relations, and then at that time I became an air traffic controller for 10 years with the FAA. That's where I met my husband, and we have 2 wonderful kids. And my kids are the reasons I've been in the trenches for nearly a decade now, fighting education issues, safety issues, developmental issues. I chaired a statewide literacy initiative. I tend to talk quickly because I used to be an air traffic controller. I hear my pace speeding up. So for any reason I go too fast, reel me back in. That's my disclaimer.
Okay.
But why I choose this vehicle to help my kids, because I do care about their future. Honestly, I'm just a big student council nerd at heart. I love every part of this process. I love the debates. I love the fact finding. I love people telling me I can't do something because that's a motivational speech. I love putting together big teams because you never do anything great on your own. And I love just getting out there and meeting the people and representing them. I filed February of last year, and one of the reasons for that was to make sure I had enough time to make sure I was educated on tort reform, numeric water nutrient standards. I took a boat ride down the St. Johns River to find out about the mile point thing. Went down to Hastings, talked to the farmers, took a ride along with the sheriff's department. All that kind of stuff to just really try to do the best on educating myself on the issues. I don't think, I know you don't ask for bio stuff, I want to make sure. I'm very blessed, besides a 52-man volunteer team who have stuck with me for over a year and a half. We've just picked up another 50 additional volunteers that are helping us with door walking. This is my steering committee, and each one of them have signed endorsements and literally do steer me. They each has their area of expertise and pipe in and give their 2 cents when there's something that affects their industry that they can give me feedback on. And I'll finish by saying I think the difference between me and the 2 opponents I'm running against, being a Navy brat, I think that provides me unique experiences. I've lived in Cuba and I've lived in the Philippines, and when I was in 9 public schools. So I think you have to learn quickly how to adapt with people, try to find that bridge, get out of your comfort zone, meet with people. I'm the only one with a very large team, like I said, 52 volunteers, so I'm very, very humbled by their support. Also, I'm the only one that has an economic development initiative. Last year when I filed, I said I didn't want to be one of those candidates that just said I want to grow jobs. I said I really wanted to focus, what can I do, what can I uniquely bring to the table? And actually I have 2. One I've been working on bringing my air traffic background to the table, working with small satellite manufacturing, and the other one is on the education. Actually, the commissioner for our Florida education, George Robinson, appointed me along with 29 others in the state to be on his digital task force. But I've been spending over a year researching the best practices around the nation and have formed a parent group and basically have come up with a plan on how to get laptops for all 2.66 million students, all infrastructure, and all the teacher training a year in advance without touching the budget. And so I've been working on that as well. And finally, I'm the only one that, even though I've been an air traffic controller, I've owned my own small business. I've owned a couple dry cleaner drops in Jacksonville and worked for other companies. I'm not doing those jobs now. And I think that is probably one of the strongest assets I bring to the table is I'm accessible. This is a full-time job, in my opinion. This is not a part-time job. And I think it's critical, especially in this economy, to be able to go to all parts of the district, talk to different people, and make sure you're spending the adequate time not only within your constituents within those hours, but researching and making sure that you're doing the best job that you can.
Cool. Who would like to begin?
You want to go with the economic question? That's what you brought up.
Yeah, the economy you talk about and is on your list as job 1. And one of the things that you're quoted as saying is talking about, it's a couple of things actually. It's talking about right-sizing government, and to do that, you said to remove the barriers to get our neighbors back to work. And that's a quote, and I'm curious of what your thoughts are as far as government, right-sizing of government in relation. What are those barriers and how do you remove them?
Great question. Regulations, number one. I think there's a lot of not only departments that overlap, but there's a lot of, in my opinion, unnecessary regulations that really just choke our economy. I'll give you a quick example.
Good. My next question.
Oh, is that?
Yeah,
Give
what's an example?
Okay, because this is one of my favorite examples. Jeb Smith, he's actually backed me as well. I'm very fortunate to be friends with him. He is the president of the Florida Farm Bureau. He's a fifth-generation farmer in Hastings. And when I went down to visit his farmlands, he explained recently he noticed a little salt in his water when he was watering his farm. Oh no, by the way, when I lived in Georgia, I was the president of Future Farmers of America when I lived up there. So very deep. That's why that's one of my 3 platforms. I'm very strong in the agriculture. But he was explaining that there was some salt in the water, so they needed to get another well. So he sent one of his workers to get a license to dig a new well. The guy came back and said, we've just now been told with regulations we have to cap the existing 8 wells first before we can dig a new well at $6,000 a cap. Now 2 of those wells were capped by earth because he's lived there so long. He's 5th generation. So he'd have to pay $48,000 of caps before he could even start to build his $5,000 or $6,000 well. I'm like, Jeff, what did you do? And he's like, well, grandfather still lives out here. He knew where the 2 were buried. They took a metal detector out. They dug them up. One of them had clean enough water to kind of sustain him for a little while, and because of his position, he was able to get some people to walk the farm, and they were able to not have to pay the $48,000. But long story short, we're killing our small family businesses like that. And Jed has even told me, he said, Kimmy, I'm getting to the point with all these different regulations, and I know there needs to be a certain amount, but they've just gotten so out of whack, in my opinion. He said he's thinking about switching all his produce to just beef fed cattle and selling it to Russia. You know, and not only is agriculture our 2nd largest industry in the state, it's our food source, you know, and so things like that just really pull at my heart when we're just not using common sense, and you know.
Okay.
Kim, I want to ask, this came out early this week from the state legislature's Economic and Demographic Research panel. They said that the unemployment rate has indeed dropped from 9.9 to 8.2, 8.3, but they said that the reason it's dropped is because people have dropped out of the workforce. If those people had stayed in the workforce, the jobless rate would have dropped from 9.9 to 9.6, so 0.3%.
Yeah.
So basically, not many jobs have been created. What is happening is that people are leaving the workforce. So that's a sign that something's not working. What should the state legislature do differently to prop up job growth? Because this is a legislative research group that's come up with this conclusion, so it's not a political group, a Democratic or even a Republican group.
Absolutely. And very interesting on the taking notes, very interesting on that percentage-wise. When I met with Grace Swope to talk to him about the small satellite manufacturing, and actually he had no clue about it. There was no state that had a monopoly on manufacturing the small satellites. Back when I met with him last June, and in October he sent the lieutenant governor to Spain for us to partner a deal to start manufacturing small satellites in our state. I asked him to, I said, you know what, it's just my idea. I would say, I think 160 legislators should all be challenged to bring at least one economic development initiative to the table. You know, maybe they don't know it firsthand, but they should go out to their constituents. There's got to be some great ideas out there. And if we challenged our legislators to at least come up with one, I think that would really help. You know, there may be some unique creative idea that in Tallahassee they're not thinking about it because they haven't reached out really well grassroots wise. So obviously I've got those 2 economic development pieces. Other than that, I think we could have more tort reform. I think when we start putting caps on attorney's fees, I remember back in 2003 when they put caps on attorney's fees for workman's comp, literally overnight they went down, the claims went down by 60%. I think we need to have a world-class education. I think that's critical. And I think we could really, really help our real estate issues. You know, Florida on the average now, last year we were at 600 days, now we're at 676. We have 676 days average foreclosure. Georgia's at 52. And there's no reason for that, but Georgia is a non-judicial foreclosure state. So, and we've got well over 350,000 homes in backlog. We need to get some judges out of retirement. We need to start pulling those foreclosures out of foreclosure. We need to do things like being stronger on adverse possession laws and things like that. I think everybody feels the crunch. The job and the home, to me, are the two biggest things that are signs. You can go to the movies less. You can, your expendable finances, you can make some allowances with. But if you don't have a home and you don't have a job, that's just, I think, the biggest sign. So those would be my top 4 ideas.
So you said basically each legislator, if he or she came up with an idea, and then the best ones would percolate their way to the top, but you don't know what those ideas would be other than the satellite manufacturing.
Oh, for me,
Yeah.
mine are the 2, small satellite manufacturing and working on the digital stuff. I've come up with 15 different sources of funding for digital implementation. I've come up with training of teachers and replication of other states.
Okay. Why don't we go into that?
The
One
whole
more segue
education
into that.
stuff.
I know that this is a big issue for you, and you mentioned a second ago digital, and then laptops, or I don't know whether laptops or iPads, whatever you have planned to get each to. Explain how that would work and where the money's going to come from.
Sure, actually, I'm getting all something in writing, and I'll just do broad strokes. I don't think it's a bad thing. I like having a deadline on this because I've got a ninth grade son and an 8th grade daughter, so it's personal. I don't want my son living at home when he's 25. So I'm passionate about this.
I didn't want that either.
Due to legislation that has passed, the end of course exams being required to be online, and the digital textbook requirement, which textbooks to me, that's one-on-one. If you want your child to take their textbook home, they need to have a digital version, that means a laptop. And because of Race to the Top requirements. All 3 of those things are supposed to be implemented within 2.5 years. And actually the 62 school districts, ours being one of them, that signed off on Race to the Top and said they'd have to have all the infrastructure, accessibility, wiring, etc. All that's supposed to be done, or part or all of that $700 million grant could go back. So everybody I've sat down with in Tallahassee, et cetera, and asked, do we have a plan? Are we looking at teacher training? Nobody seems to have an answer. So as we've done with many of our initiatives, we've put together a big group of parents and teachers to get input. We've sat down with Dr. Joyner, Bev Slough, the teacher unions, book depository people, the PTA, you name it. So it's still a work in progress. This is just a culmination of where we are today. There are quick reads. You can read the first page is just at a glance how much everything would cost. Our biggest replication that we've been looking at is the state of Maine has gone digital statewide for 11 years, from 6th grade through 12th grade. And Mooresville District in North Carolina, just north of Charlotte, has gone completely digital, K through 12, for 4 years. And they have tremendous data on gains, academic gains, graduation, everything else. And both those locations only pay $200 per student per laptop, and it includes teacher training, because they lease them, which I think is very smart. I'm surprised that so many school districts still buy them, because after their 3-year lease, then the competition is back in there. They're only paying $200, and then they get the newest version of whatever the technology is. So these are the rough outs on the infrastructure. The second page includes 15 different funding sources from everybody's kind of input. 4 of them actually do not touch the budget. The next one is a sample timeline. I especially feel very strongly on doing a pilot program first, picking 1 school district per pilot, per DOE region. So we'd start with 5 pilot regions and pick a small section like just elementary schools or just 6th and 7th grade. And always, just like the state of Maine and Mooresville, always keeping teacher training 1 year ahead. Those places actually gave the laptops to the teachers for a full year before they let the students have the laptops, which I think was very smart, so they got comfortable with it. And the last page is just some points of interest, like South Korea, Uruguay, and Thailand have all gone 1-to-1 laptop per student nationwide. So I think it's urgent.
Where do the cost savings come from? Basically, not having to buy books.
That's one of them. When you switch over from hard textbooks to soft textbooks, and not paying for Xerox machines, globes, calculators, etc., you're going to save about $200 million. We spend currently every year $273 million on our textbooks in the state. So that would switch over from hard textbooks to digital textbooks. The number one on here, I would like to see the class size amendment put back in the ballot, the 2014 ballot, loosening, say like 2 to 4 students per class, but leaving it at the principal control. So if Marcia has a class of 8 ESE children, and she doesn't want to add one more, that's fine. But if Margot over here has 22 kids in algebra, and she's like, mid-semester, 2 more kids, I've got computers, no big deal, bring it on. Then that flexibility would be there. Currently, we're spending $3 to $5 billion a year to implement class size. So we suggest that cost savings would be used for the digital implementation for everything that's needed. Plus, it would save our electives and our advanced placement courses, which we've all got letters from Dr. Joyner saying that we're going to loosen as well.
Yeah, my question, real quickly, because we're on that topic, but one of the big questions in that scenario is that the textbook manufacturers, knowing this is coming, are pricing their digital products almost at the levels of their print products, which has been a controversial issue for some time now. Do you see that changing?
When we went to Morrisville, North Carolina, we asked them, and I can find that list too. They gave us a packet, it's about 8 pages of all the different resources they use digitally to put together. They're spending $40 per student for all the digital resources like Discovery Ed, etc., where we spend $75 per student for a textbook. And that's one of the other funding sources as well that would save us $70 million right off the cap if we would get rid of our Florida statute that says we have to have a requirement that we have to have a textbook in our state. North Carolina does not.
Okay.
Let me just ask this. The voters have twice, it's gone to the ballot twice and changed
Right.
the class size amendment. Twice it's been comfortably defeated. Why do you think, and it now requires a 60% threshold, what makes you think that the voters would change after they clearly like small class sizes?
Absolutely. I was one of those people that voted for class size two dumps ago, 2 ballot drops ago. We weren't educated, number one. I think many of the parents. We would need to have 300,000 votes basically to get that 6% change their mind and say, yes, we would. Everybody that we've sat down with, that we've been asking, we started networking out. Number one, they weren't messaged. They didn't realize it was costing us $3 to $5 billion to implement it. But number two, they didn't know where that money was going. So we feel very strongly that if I know, okay, the principal says it's okay. I mean, at school level and not 100 kids in a class, but if we have flexibility, then I can have digital. Every kid has a level playing field. Every student will get a laptop. Teacher training will be taken care of. We won't lose our $700 million base to top grant. I get to save electives, band, choir, art, football, and get to save the advanced placement courses. Absolutely. I feel very strongly out of 19 million people, I know not all of them are voter age, but 300,000 people, if they got the memo, would vote for that. But we haven't had that in the last 2. I do know that they're talking about doing some private funding for focus groups and polling to see if that would work. But that's just my heart. I feel strongly that if that was out there, they would vote for it.
Remember last time there was some big heavyweights. Former Governor Bush, he was one who was trumpeting a very popular, wide following. He wasn't able to convince people, or at least not enough people.
Well, once again, I think you got to get to the moms.
Mm-hmm.
I sat down with the Commissioner of Education and I said, I don't know where y'all spent your millions of dollars advertising this. I don't know if it was a Golf Channel because I'm pretty active and I didn't see it. And I said, actually, the things that you can do to flip these 300,000 votes are free. I said, you yourself, if you just write one letter, just explaining what this is, how much we spend, what this would be used for, and you sent it to all the principals, school board teachers, and told the teachers to send it out to the parents. The moms will read this. This comes home in the Tuesday folder. We're going to read that. Then we're going to get it. And if not, again, we're required. So we can go back to and when we sat down with groups as well, and we said, this isn't the sure thing. This is a culmination of a lot of ideas. But this aside, this law is coming. We have, and of course, exams that are required now, digital textbooks that are required now, Race to the Top, which we've taken money for now, and we're supposed to be implementing that contract. So where are you guys coming up with the funding sources? How are you implementing that teacher training? I've not had anybody from Tallahassee to every school district to every superintendent teacher I've sat down with. Nobody seems to have a plan out there. So I don't want to see us, Peter, in 2.5 years, having some computers thrown at us, not every child, not having teachers trained, and all of a sudden now we're having to give back our little portion of Race to the Top for our county that we were given, and just have a big mess. So we're trying, just like we have before, kind of a statewide PTO, coming up with a plan and trying to at least highlight it to the decision makers to say, look, you got a lot of funding sources. Maybe you don't like this one, but there's 14 others. Look at teacher training. Look at other states that have done it right. Let's do it right. Let's not slam dunk our teachers and end up hurting our students.
You talk about getting money, so let me throw this one at you. Governor Bush has said, former Governor Bush has said that pay for performance won't work if there isn't any money for it. It clearly, if it works, it will cost billions of dollars. Where's the money going to come from?
Again, I don't know where their plan is. I can't speak for them, Peter. But if I get to the legislature, I would start with this, raise the class size amendment, saving $3 to $5 billion. I think that's a huge chunk, and that's annually. There's other locations like that. I don't know. So when you say billions, how much is it? Because this is the first time anybody's hit me on the merit pay or performance pay. How much is it going to cost? And then I can try to figure out exactly, are we talking 1, 2, 20, 30?
Bill Proctor has said that the goal of merit pay is to get the average teacher's salary up to $60,000.
Okay.
Various districts have different prices. In this district, the average salary is $48,000. So that's $22 million a year.
Okay.
So for one district.
Sure.
And that's assuming obviously that everybody gets it. They won't. So that's the high end. But this is the most successful school district, so presumably per capita you're going to have a greater number of teachers who meet the standards for getting merit pay, pay for performance rather. So it's a lot of money. No one knows where the money's coming from, and Governor Bush says it won't work if somebody doesn't pony up the money. The school district has $30 million in its reserve funds, and they can't spend it down because they feel that the recession is going to last a couple more years, and they have to dip into it to get through. So the question is, for pay for performance to work,
Okay.
the legislature presumably is going to have to come up with money. So
Okay.
you're right. You're seeking.
That's a
this
great
office.
question. Since $22 million would cost St. Johns County, we have 37,000 students, I believe, in our county.
About 31.
31,000. Okay. Basically, and we have 2.66 million students statewide. So it's at least would be times 10, probably less than times 10. But if we multiply it by 10, that would give us 2.2 billion that would be needed. First of all, we're saying 3 to 5 billion on class size. So that definitely would cover it. And doing everything in one day, getting every school up to T3s and access points and everything else would cost less than 1 billion. So that would cover it right there. But let's think of some other creative ways. And that's a great question. I'm going to go home and research
Just
that.
went off, so I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Thanks, Margaret.
Is that? Do they have a? I've got this
It
great.
got tired.
You got tired? I've got this great. You snap on it and like recharges it, like a second battery. My husband just got it for me.
Okay.
Am I in the shadow? Close enough.
No, of course. Okay.
Some other creative ways, and I'm going to go look. I've printed out the budget. It's 437 pages, which my husband.
Delightful reading, yeah.
I like to highlight and all that. We're going digital, but I'm still a little old school. So I'm going to look for other ways. But other than this, which is an obvious thing to me, you can look at creative. San Francisco, California, internally is bringing all their teachers' salaries up to $100,000. Yes, annually. And how they're doing it is within their own school, and they take no private funding, is working like in quarters. So 25% of the time, these elementary schools at Rocket Ship, San Francisco, they are in a computer lab. And they have like a paraprofessional there. They practice long vowels over and over again, or things that are very redundant. They don't have their teachers use their time in the bus loop. They use their educators to educate. And I love this because my grandmother taught for 30 years up in Dinsmore Elementary School. My great-grandmother was actually the first female superintendent in Macon County. But they use that 25% of the time to just go over monotonous things, back work, computer work, that kind of stuff. And then the other 3/4 of the time, they're using educators. And they're using the educators not where they're wasted, not doing cafe duty, not doing bus duty. So they're saving 25% each year. And every year they're bringing up that salary, and they're going to get it up to 100,000 within a few years. So that would be something creative to possibly look at and present to the superintendents and see if there's some way they could do a variation of that. Also, looking at the budget, and this will be my third one just off the top of my head, there's simple things, like when we look at our checkbook. If the state would spend all the money that they spend on name brand stuff, like a pilot pen, they just bought generic supplies, we would save $305 million every year. Something as simple as that. You're still getting the supply, but you're not paying for the name brand. So those would be my top 3 ideas. And then I am going to look at that. It's a good question.
It's on the ballot in November. Is going to be changing the law to basically permit public funding for religious institutions. Do you favor vouchers for religious and private schools?
Yes, I support ballots, not only for, ballots. I don't know why y'all make me nervous. Y'all are always so, I apologize.
We've known you.
I know, and that's
You're the
I think
only
it's the table.
candidate I've ever taken to the roof of this building and not thrown off.
And I was waiting for the punchline.
It's true, we watched a shuttle launch in the building here.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody with us, somebody's kids wanted to go to the edge and I wouldn't let them. So anyway, you're still on.
Yes, the vouchers, I support vouchers for other institutions as well as homeschools. I think that's something that needs to be addressed as well. If you're homeschooling, I think we should look at that as well. I think it's a great opportunity with different types of schools. Having been a military brat, I think when I lived in the Philippines, we almost went to Australia, and I would have had to take my entire senior year online if I wanted to stay with my family. And I can't imagine what a digital school back then in 1985 would have looked like. But I like the options, and I think the vouchers should follow the student.
So where's the money going to come from? Those children are not getting money now. There's no state money is going to pay for those kids who are homeschooled. There are some online programs that the school district provides, but basically money isn't following that child. They're not following the kid to St. Joe's. They're not following the kid to any of the other private and parochial schools. So that would be new money. Where's it going to come from?
Again, I'd like to look at it. I'd like to look at if the kids are going to, we have some great, like the ARC school. It's a charter school here. It's fantastic as far as helping with our children with disabilities. One of my girlfriends works at the Votech High School. That's half charter, half public. I think there's some great blending and some great things out there that we should be looking at moving some money to help those students. I would like to look at the numbers on the homeschool. I think we're at 70,000 students, somewhere around there statewide on that homeschool. And I'd like to see how much they're saving us by not being in a seat, not using a lot of our facilities and things like that. But I would like to address it. I think if I had a child with special needs or needed a different kind of environment, I would like to see how we can address that. I would like to look at that. If the money's not there, it's not there, absolutely. That's the biggest thing, and that's why I like with this digital, I looked at the hardcore numbers first. That's always the most important. You're correct.
Now, how much does the digital program cost? What's the overall cost per annum?
If we implemented everything today, as a rough guess, you'll see it on the bottom of the page, somewhere around 800 to 900 million, I think. 846, 946. If we had every single school, needed to be...
So there's 3.5 billion you don't really need for this. This is gravy. This is okay.
Yes, sir. So you could use that extra 2.2 for merit pay. All right, next, we're going to solve all our problems today.
just make the case, you've heard this argument a million times, that the opponents of charters of public payments for vouchers for religious schools say, I don't want my money to go to some religious institution with which I'm in disagreement. And they give the example of a Muslim school. But, it could be simply a Southern Baptist who doesn't want to give to a Catholic school, no Catholic who doesn't want to give to a Southern Baptist, just because, nothing wrong with those religions, but they just may not agree. How do you address the question that your public money is going to be to educate some child in a religious and a religious school with which you disagree?
You know, I think we need to step back and look, not be so caught in the weeds, and step back a minute. And I think you need to look at where's your public funding going statewide. There's so many people that don't have kids in school that would make the same argument. Well, why am I paying for schools and this percentage of my taxes being used for that? And I never had children, and I'm 80 years old, and how does this benefit me? To me, that's the same argument. And obviously, we moved down here. My husband drives 62 miles one way to work because these are the best schools in the state, hands down. And I'm very blessed that my husband will take that long drive for us. We could have stayed in Duval and gone to the local schools, gone to charter schools. We chose to come to public schools. But I think you should be able to have that choice. So I think that's why I'm very much a big proponent of the digital stuff that is coming and doing it right. I really think, just like the state of Maine, when I talked to Jeff Mal, who's over their digital implementation, he said there's very few charter schools there, and there's very few private schools. They don't have a need for that. Now, they only have 180,000 students compared to our 2.6 million. But I think if we do it right, if we do the education system right, there won't be this feeling of this big hodgepodge mess of going here, there, and yonder. I would just like to see a really solid plan like this that looks at the state all together, that brings in all the superintendents together, that really looks at it. If Maine can go statewide, 6th through 12th grade, we can do it K through 12. We can do it right. And I just would like to see, and stop having little arguments in the weeds of, well, this person doesn't have kids. I've heard that before. So why should I pay? Da, da, da. Because education overall for our state and for our nation is critical.
That wasn't the issue I'm raising. It was just about the issue about public money
Because
for religious education.
Public money going for religious education or anything that helps the education in our state is money well spent.
Can I tag on to that?
Uh-huh.
Doing my research for
Okay.
today, and one of the platforms, or one of your components of your platform, is a return to Judeo-Christian ethics and foundations in our community. How does that fit with supporting Islamic schools?
And can you be a little more specific on the question? I don't.
Well, if your platform or your thoughts are that we need to reinstate the Judeo-Christian ethics into our being and into our state and into our laws and all those, how does that fit in support educational support for those things that don't follow the Judeo-Christian ethic?
Well, I don't think we should be supporting things like the Quran and things that aren't based on our principles of our forefathers or constitutional government. I think I would like to see something specific. If I feel like I'm answering a specific question with a broad stroke, and I'm kind of don't know if I feel like obviously I'm not answering y'all's question.
That just sounded at odds a little bit to me. That was just my question.
Let me put it
Okay.
this way. Yes, in the state of Florida, the Judeo-Christian culture is predominant, but it's not everywhere in the state. There are Islamic students here. There are Buddhist children here. There are people of, if you name it, they're here. And in some of those cases, they may have schools for their religion. So if there was a school out there that was teaching the Quran and was seeking public education, you just said you wouldn't support that. The issue is basically, how do you get, people are going to be opposed to, some anyway, may be opposed to, as I said, putting money for a Catholic school or Southern Baptist school or for an Islamic school. So how do you address it? Isn't that just like opening a hornet's nest?
I'm sure, absolutely. I would, yeah, you're right. I would love to see that example, and you may have me change my mind on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we should, as Americans, I don't think we should support something that's anti-American. I've lived in the Philippines and Cuba and had to follow those specific nations' rules. In the Philippines, we were on a U.S. Navy base, and we weren't allowed to raise the American flag, and we weren't allowed to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So you have to respect those rules, policies, laws of those countries. And if it's something that goes against our foundation, our Constitution, then I would not be for putting money towards something that's anti-American.
Okay. Let me just ask you, you mentioned charter schools, let me just ask a quick question. I'm sure you've heard this a million times. How upset the school board members are about the legislative proposal that would have put money for building charter schools, but not for charter schools, which are privately run schools that receive public funds, and not for public schools when there's a need, clearly a need in this county for building more schools. Would you support or oppose that proposal? Certainly is going to come up again and again. The proposal as it now exists is money for charter school construction, no money for construction of public schools as we know it here in St. John's County.
Right, it's not right. We are, back, has it been at least 10 years? You may know the exact date. Our budget used to be, the largest pie piece used to be education, and Medicaid was second, and now they flipped. We do need to make education more funded. It needs to be our largest pie piece in the budget. We still need to be good stewards of our money. Governor Christie said they spend on an average $18,000 per student in New Jersey and $25,000 per student in Camden with a lot of failing schools. So, I want to put that caveat in there, we can't be hog wild with the money, but yes, there needs to be more funding, absolutely. I mean, you know how many schools, we've been in 5 different schools in the same house and always seem to open up a school with portables. But also because charter schools are public schools, I think they should receive funding as well. And I think there needs to be that level playing field. There seems to be, it's interesting when I sat down with Beverly Slough and Colleen Wood, there were some discrepancies between the charter schools and public schools. And I'm like, absolutely, if anybody who receives public funding needs to have the same public accountability, absolutely. But it needs to be on both sides. And I would like to see, groups coming more together to the table. It's funny, I was over the special projects for Senator Thrasher's campaign, and it was during the Senate Bill 6 stuff. And I was researching that, I was researching Race to the Top. I joined his campaign because without him, we wouldn't have middle school sports here in St. Johns County. 63 other districts in our state paid for middle school sports through their school district, but ours didn't. We did all with private funding. So that's why I volunteered my time. After the bill was vetoed, and I have 7 teachers on my campaign team who keep me in line, I heard a lot of complaints. And I said, you know what? Nobody, at least John Thrasher, assumes he's still going to be senator come November. So right now, I don't like hearing complaints. That's not me. Do something. Try to fix it. So I said, you know what? I'm going to talk to Senator Thrasher, see if he'll sit down. He did. I invited him to my house. I had 8 teachers at my house. Beverly Slough was there. I invited Dr. Joyner. He couldn't make it. I said, y'all tell him where the bill's messed up. Let's try to fix some of it. Many of those good changes ended up in Senate Bill 736. And that's what needs to be done. It's a shame that, and I know it happens, even just as the business liaison for Timberland Creek, and you get private business involved. We had 143 business partners, we needed them, and everybody wants little Johnny coming home with, Mommy, I want to go to McDonald's. Look at this coupon. But we gotta just get rid of the garbage, focus on our children, come to the table, bring all groups to the table, and come out with the best decisions.
You brought up this point, so I just want to follow up. Bill
Okay.
Proctor said the biggest problem if you think of it as the Pac-Man coming
Okay.
through eating up the budget, is Medicaid.
Okay?
And I know what his suggestions for remedies are. I want to find out what your remedies are to control that. He said it's growing at an exponential rate, and how would you slow it down or even reduce it?
2 big things for me would be looking at the long-term home care, like elder care. Actually, for the limited amount of policies they allowed this last session, taxwatch.org or net has said that we've already saved $50 million doing that and prolonging the time the elderly citizens can stay at home. Mm-hmm. And the other way I would look at it is more tort reform. I think that's a great way to, putting caps on attorney's fees and trying to we'll never get rid of fraud completely, but we can stop fueling the fire. And I think those would be 2 huge areas where we could see some good results in the large Medicaid budget.
Okay, now that wasn't the way he was heading. Where he was heading was good controlling cost to HMOs and other type of vehicles which would control it. So,
okay, well this is the way I'm looking at it.
I want to ask you this question. This is, like Ron, I did some homework. This is what you said on October 22nd at a Republican Party function. Quote, we must allow students in science class to question whether evolution is the basis of the origin of life. Mm-hmm. What's that mean?
That's a great question. 4 years ago, I think it's been 4 now, y'all been following me, you probably tell me better. Mm-hmm. I was actually the one that authored the Evolution Academic Freedom Bill. My girlfriend Lori, who's a teacher, edited it. we were going through our science standards. Y'all know every 7 years the textbooks rotate through. And there was a big push, and actually some of our FCAT testing questions were very dogmatic in evolution. Things like evolution is the basis for all of biology. Now, whether you believe that to be true or not, even scientists will say, what happened to the cell theory? We're not even going to acknowledge that. We were so dogmatic in those things that in science class, we should be able to question everything. And I remember talking to my son about the planets, and he was trying to memorize them. And I remember in 5th grade when we went to Mosh, Mary's very eager mother just served us 9 pizzas. That was the mnemonic device that taught me how the planets in a row. My son said, what's pizzas? I'm like, Pluto. He's like, Pluto's not a planet, Mom. Everybody knows that it's a star. Well, we were all, I'm sure, tested. Pluto was a planet. It was in the textbooks. It was tested, da-da-da. And they came up with new information. We've got better sources, a lot of better stuff in science. So science class is about questioning everything. And what we were up against was very dogmatic styles of, they didn't even want us to question things like, we want to apply microbiology to macrobiology. And whether you believe that or not, we should be able to allow our students in class to be able to ask those questions. And that's something that absolutely I'm very passionate about. I don't think we should ever close down.
Okay, let me ask this. When I heard this, and that's why I wrote it down, I thought that perhaps this is where we heading. Are you calling for the teaching of the biblical version of the creation of life in science classes?
And that's a good question too. No, I'm not. First of all, it's illegal. Second of all, as of today, I would never want some of these science teachers teaching my kids about God. Mm-hmm. Again, it's simply about academic freedom and allowing those students to be able to ask questions, just like with the Pluto example. And that's a great question, Pete, because a lot of people make that jump of an assumption. Obviously, you're an investigative reporter, so you did make that jump, so I appreciate that. But yeah, it's about keeping that window open.
The next obvious question to me, does that also include intelligent design?
If I don't know enough about intelligent design, I will be honest about that. If intelligent design, because I've read different things, so I don't know which is accurate, if it crosses into the realm of religion and God and things like that, absolutely not. It's illegal. I'm not supposed to do that. If it's based on a new way of looking at science and bringing in the most up-to-date, peer-reviewed science materials, absolutely.
I want to ask you a question about growth management. In the last, since Governor Scott's been in, they signed a new growth management bill. And this isn't in the district you seek to represent, but it's caused a tremendous stir statewide and certainly in Flagler County. They approved a subdivision in Flagler County with 5,000 new homes. They don't plan to build the homes right now. Under the previous governor, it was rejected because there was no need for 5,000 homes. And everyone acknowledges there's no need for 5,000 homes. The developer acknowledges there's no need for 5,000 homes. But they've approved. But under the change in the law, they now have 5,000 homes approved and on the books down there, which eventually will be built. But they'll be built for another group of people, because when that's built, there'll be presumably new residency. It's caused a tremendous stir because the people in Palm Coast perceive that that's going to lower their values, that their values are depressed enough as it is at the hardest hit county, and that it will, when those houses are built, it will just extend for them this recession. And you see it now in St. Johns County, up by where you live. They're approving new subdivisions for which is clearly no demand. Or at least in the short term. There eventually will be a demand. These developers aren't stupid. They obviously anticipate the demand. Do you favor any modification either on this issue in the Growth Management Act or any other modification to the Growth Management Bill? Knowing you were here in 2006 and you saw that the politics at the time, which are very different than they are now, 70,000 houses approved on the books, and people said enough, stop it, and that's why the county commission got voted out. Now that there's no construction going on, there's the pendulum has swung this way. As soon as it starts, you know it'll come back. So I want to ask if there's a middle ground in any of these growth management bills, and what, if anything, would you support for changes?
There better be some middle ground. I'd like to know a little more specifics about this Palm Coast example, because I'm not familiar with the Flagler case that you referred to. So you said, the county commission approved 5,000 homes, but the locals and the developer who developed it were against it?
No, they were for it.
Okay.
The change was the change in the state law. The state law under Governor Christ, you had to, that was the law, not Governor Christ's law, but the growth management
Okay,
law that was in effect said you have to show a need for construction. So if you're going to build 5,000 homes, you have to show there's a need for it. So under Governor, whoever the growth management director was under Governor Christ, rejected this 5,000 homes. There's no demand. The law got changed, and now those 5,000 homes are approved.
okay,
Still no demand for those 5,000 homes. The developer acknowledges it, but now he's got approval. He can get extensions in 10, 15 years down the road, he can have that. I'm just asking if St. Johns County with that could end up the same way, and you know, because you've been here long enough to know how
sure.
the whiplash it was in 2006 against the rapid fire growth. Just want to ask
Okay,
if you
I
thought
think-
about that issue.
First of all, and that will be something I'm going to look up as well when I get home. Developers, aren't in the market of building and paying impact fees and everything else to just sit there and not make money. Because you're right, I think we could have 5,000 more approved and we wouldn't even know about it because we have 70,000. We have probably 30,000 at least just in my corridor up in the Northwest. So I would like to look at that to see that there are sections where, and I sat down with Sherry Davidson, she's like, we still are selling new growth. And even in King and the Bear and places like that. So I don't know if this is a section that I'd like to see it. I'd like to see the staff reports, but to address hopefully the questions that you're trying to ask. We have to, it's funny, when I sat down with the builders, they asked about, what do you think about removal of impact fees? They do it in Duval County. And I said, in theory, on paper, that sounds great. But in reality, I'm going to be frank with you, I know y'all would probably love no impact fees. In St. Johns County right now, we've got an issue. And I started, 4,500 homes that have been approved with Twin Creeks, 5,000 Durban Creek, Aberdeen Crossing, 2,400 with Rivertown, 10,300 with Silverleaf, 2,400 with Ashford Mills. All these people just in the Northwest that have already paid millions of dollars of impact fees up front, transportation, schools, everything. And I understand their motivation of wanting to get rid of them to help develop growth, but we've got to make good to the people that have made good to us
I
first.
just want to interrupt you. Impact
Okay.
fees are a county issue, not a state issue. That wouldn't be
Okay.
something you'd be dealing with. as a
Okay, well, I was
legislator.
trying to explain about the backlog.
Mhm.
And trying to put it in such a way of with the backlog. We've got to take care of the people that are in a holding pattern.
Mhm.
Also, as far as growth management, these are my solutions. If that's, but I assumed you wanted my opinion.
That's why you're asking.
Okay.
That's why you're here.
The last time you said, Bill Proctor said, okay.
Oh, no, I was just saying
He's
that-
not in the interview seat, okay.
Yeah.
Take care of things like that. Also, again, big, like Sherry Davidson mentioned, we've got to address the appraisal issue. That's a real issue. We've got to
Excuse me,
become a
the what
non-judicial. The appraisal issue.
Okay, yeah.
It's a real issue. She said you'll have a buyer and a seller agree to a price and it's $15,000 low and it explodes. Routinely, they get people from Georgia. They're not even from here. Every realtor I've talked to has said this is not a sporadic issue. This is a real, genuine issue that needs to be addressed, as well as the foreclosure issues, as well as getting the homes out of backlog. And uniquely to District 17, we need to take care of the people that are in the holding pattern before we start, looking at something new.
Pension reform, big issue.
I'm sorry, say again?
Pension
Pension.
reform.
Okay.
Do you have any views on that?
Sure.
It's a hot issue.
Sure. When I was an air traffic controller for 10 years, I came in after Reagan said, you strike your fire, was part of that, still part of that backfill.
Mm-hmm.
We went from the guys who were still there that were pre-strikers, they were on a defined benefits program. And then I came in under a defined contribution program. And I think that's the simple solution, and the state should be doing the same thing too. You make good to the people that you've promised all along that have been there. But like my husband and I who came in, we knew we were going to be under FERS. And we knew when we signed up, so to speak, to become air traffic controllers, we were on a different retirement than the other guys.
So, to make sure I understand the lingo, one is a pension and the other is like 401k or the equivalent thereof.
Well, I think we need to move from a defined benefits program to a defined contribution program. And basically, we need to make good to people who are already employed. And it's not sustainable, the rate we're going right now for the pension program. So we need to come up with ways. I don't think we should do wrong to the people that are currently employed, and we told them we will give you X, Y, Z, and then we don't. But I think the new hires, we need to say, we're going under ABC now because we cannot sustain the pensions, just like they did with the government workers when I was hired as an air traffic controller.
Okay,
You're running out of questions, Pete. but go
no,
ahead.
I've got many more.
All right. Like the low
We're
questionnaire
running
here.
out of time. Laura, go ahead and say the word.
I do have some. I'm still trying to figure out your jobs initiative
Okay,
and how we're going to grow jobs
okay,
and exactly what your economic development viewpoint is for this area that you'll be representing.
Okay.
And of course, as legislators say, and your opponent said in a guest column, we work together with other, with other legislators to get things for North Florida,
absolutely.
Northeast Florida. But I'm not clear on this, on your jobs initiative, quite
Okay.
frankly. And I'm trying to figure out where are these jobs coming from? What kind of small scale manufacturing are we talking about?
Okay,
The ones that we're talking about, like Governor Scott goes to Spain, and there's a 25% unemployment, and banks are collapsing literally over there. So why do you go to Spain hoping to bring new business and jobs here?
right, that was a partnership with the University of Florida,
Right.
and there's family fishing. I'll answer
I
your question.
understand,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
I just want to know what
Sure.
your goals are for
And-
jobs here and
Okay.
the initiative.
There's two. Anything aeronautical, bringing my air traffic background to the table. First and foremost is small satellite manufacturing, and Cecil is actually a spaceport, and we'd like to highlight that as well. But I started with going to Cecil Bateman before he retired, here at Northrop Grumman off
Right.
US 1. And I talked to Cecil because we've dealt with him a lot over the last 10 years. He's wonderful. They have a smaller location at Cecil. And I talked to Cecil Bateman. I said, not only are we in this great location with our airport and your facilities, you're expanding them and things like that. So I'd like to see the small satellite manufacturing, a big chunk of it, done with our great facilities here in Northrop Grumman and working in concert with Cecil as they currently do, because they have a location there as well. And I'd like to continue to see what we can do as far as technology is the way of the future. So I don't think we should leave the space program to the Russians or the Chinese. Florida needs to take a hold of that. So I'd like to be able to bring my unique abilities in that. But specifically satellites, I think we could grow Northrop Grumman overnight. Education, I think we need to embrace the digital that's coming. I think we need to not be fined and not ignore teacher training, things like that. I think we bring in, they said if we would just go up to, I think it's a 92% graduation rate, we'd immediately pump in like $200 million into our economy, just graduation rate alone. The state of Maine brought this digital implementation 11 years ago as an economic driver, not as an education initiative. They had one shoe store, one shoe factory. They grew more factories. They started building some of the Apple products there, and their real estate started going up. Just like we've seen Duval County coming to St. John's, the surrounding states started going into Maine. So it was a huge economic driver, as well as just educating our kids. I mean, that's number one, and having a good workforce.
What is the difference between you and your opponents, like number 1, 2, 3, and
Sure.
yeah?
Number one, military brat. I think that's a unique skill or experience that I bring to the table. Number two would be that I'm not currently working now, and I can give 24/7 to this job. I think it's extremely important for legislators, especially now, especially with fewer legislators representing our county, to be accessible and have that time to be able to go everywhere. And third would be the economic initiatives that I've already, again, because I have the time, trying to think out the box, working specifically on that, and of course, then doing the research just overall, how can you grow the economy overall with tort reform or less regulations and things like that.
Tort reform's been tried before. So, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right.
I like Pete. I've got about 1 million questions, but we're going to. Marcy, did you have any?
No.
Yes, sir. I did have one maybe fairly general question that just seems to me kind of from what I read about you and what I hear about you, and some of the speeches that I watched online that you've made. And you talk about returning back to the foundation and the views of our forefathers, the vision of the forefathers. Can you expand a little bit on that, what you mean, and particularly in, and I wrote it down, that we shouldn't support things un-American, but I'm not really sure anymore with our forefathers' vision, how that compares to the America that currently exists and the changes that have come to America and what it is versus what it was. How do you reconcile all of that and what does that really mean? And not a novel, but as I think about those things, some of the things like when we were chatting about the Christian principles versus school funding, some of those sound to me almost at odds, and I'm not sure what that really means when you say it.
Okay. Basic principles in the Constitution: limited government, lower taxes, local control. Acknowledging our Judeo-Christian principles, allowing our constitutional rights. Having lived in Cuba and seeing the Cuban commuters that worked on our base, it was over 200, Castro took 90% of their pay. And they got rations of rice, rations of underwear, and things like that. And I've seen what big government looks like, and that's not my cup of tea. And I think, my grandmother always said that the pendulum will swing back and forth. We can go a little too far this way, and go a little too far that way. And I feel like the pendulum is starting to swing too far and into the big government realm, and not embracing American exceptionalism and embracing what we can do, as individuals, and supporting our true Americana. And so that's where I think, again, if we just go back, sometimes it's just simplistic, just looking at the Constitution and just go back to basics, so to speak.
Last comment?
Well, can I just have one other question? There was a story in today's Florida Times Union. It's a fascinating story. It's about a guy in Keystone Heights who shot a gun into the ground, and he was committing a crime. He was trying to scare some kids away, but he shot the gun in the ground. The judge sentenced him to 2 or 3 years. The prosecutor appealed, said it was under the 10-20 life rule, and the judge said that the prosecutor overcharged. She appealed, she won. He was sentenced to 20 years. The judge said the law was not intended for this. He didn't fire the gun at anybody, he fired it into the ground. And there's considerable debate in the legal community about the rigid sentencing guidelines, especially over the 10-20 life. And I have a hunch that if there's a change slightly, and obviously the Republicans are going to control the next legislature, but if there's a change, more moderates and perhaps more Democrats coming in, this might come up as an issue. What is your view? Do you think that if you thought about the 10-20 life rule and what modifications, if any, would you consider to?
I'm going to say I did not read the Florida Times Union article on this Keystone Heights example.
Well, another one was a lady that recently fired a gun when her husband was attacking her, shot it into the ceiling. She got 20 years.
Okay.
And that was Corey Brown, Angela Corey.
Angela Corey was the prosecutor in both these cases.
Okay, and then it was judged constitutional to the
Well,
person.
what happened was the judge said that they overcharged her, and he sentenced the man for 2 or 3 years in prison. Corey appealed, went to the appeals court. Appeals court ruled, sided with Corey, and the man was sentenced. The judge refused to do it, so they assigned another judge to do it, and he was sentenced to 20 years. And the judge is making the case that it was just way overcharged and should not be serving 20 years. Because the man's in ill health, it's tantamount to a death sentence for him. So the question is would you favor any, or have you considered any modifications to this 10-20 life bill?
I will try to answer you in broad strokes. It's another asterisk. I'm going to go read more specifics on the 10-20 life. I only know broad strokes, 1, 2, 3. I didn't realize, obviously, the 2 examples you guys have given me just do not sit well with me at all. Obviously, they are overcharged, in my opinion, and I'm a big proponent of the Second Amendment. So obviously, there's some major disconnect if that is what's occurring. So yeah, I would like to look at it, and if those are the issues, then, and that would be a modification to not have, where we're taking out, if somebody shoots the ground and they're going to jail for 20 years, absolutely that needs to be modified. But again,
Yeah, I think the law is using a firearm in the commission of any crime is mandatory 20.
Shooting the firearm.
Shooting.
Having the
Okay.
firearm.
Yeah,
is
right.
10
I'm
years.
good with that. Thank you for
Yeah.
telling me about that. Okay.
Shooting is 20, killing is life.
Okay.
Well, and even then, there's a case of a woman in Duval County who was 18 years old, she's now 38 or so, been in for prison for 20 years. She went and with her boyfriend, and they burglarized a store. Boyfriend shot the clerk, killed him. She did not shoot him, did not have a gun, but she's serving life without parole. And that is, that was before the 10-20 life came in, but it was one of those things that has caught the attention of people. So, she didn't even have a gun. She didn't shoot the guy, but she was with him. And
Do you know the name of that person?
I can't remember. I just remember
Okay.
the case.
I like to research. I mean, I don't know everything, but I can try to learn.
Okay, I interjected a question when Ron was actually saying it's your chance to say whatever you want to say.
That's all right.
Just trying to keep us on track, So you get to close, or anything you want to say, or anything that we overlooked that you thought is important enough to bring up or to say, or to just get your last dig, as it were, whatever you prefer.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I think Margot hit it with me as far as telling what my differences are. I'm very passionate. I have always said that St. Johns County is a big, small town. And we are. We have all the benefits of a big city, but the heart of a small town. There's no way I would have been able to co-found middle school sports and bring all the middle school sports programs in here with all private funding and volunteerism if I'd been in another county or any other county that I know about. We immediately get to meet with our school board reps and our legislators and our businessmen, and everybody immediately said, how can we pitch in? Instead of going, you're going to bring 8 middle schools all football, cheer, whatever, without any money and no volunteerism. So I just love that about St. Johns County, and I feel strongly that our 160 that sit in Tallahassee, they need to not only have the skill set and the experience, but they also need to have the heart of whatever district they're representing. Key West is not Pensacola, it's not Jacksonville, we're all unique, and I think that person really needs to be able to take the heart of that spirit with them.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.